Welcome back. Over the last few years, we've been told that what's happening with children and gender medicine is compassionate, settled science, and beyond debate. And we're told that if you raise concerns, you're cruel. If you hesitate, you're dangerous. And if you ask questions, you're on the wrong side of history. What you're about to hear has nothing to do with hate and everything to do with love. It has nothing to do with denying anyone's humanity. It has everything to do with facts versus ideology and putting children's safety above everything else. This is about parents. This is about the state stepping in where it never belongs. And this is about what happens when opinions and facts are treated as disagreement. And disagreement itself becomes a. I want to tell you the story of one father because once you hear this, you will understand this is not an isolated case. It's a warning. Let me start with a father whose story really stopped me in my tracks. His name is Brent Bowlby. He lives in Minnesota, and what happened to him should alarm every parent in this country. Please pay attention. Brent wasn't fighting his child. He wasn't trying to destroy his child's life. He wasn't trying to punish or shame or abandon anyone. His child began identifying as transgender. And like virtually every other parent would, Brent had questions. He wanted to understand what was happening. He wanted some time and he wanted to talk. And most importantly, he wanted to be part of the conversation about his own kid. That is parenting. But the moment Brent tried to slow things down, the moment he asked questions about powerful drugs and medical intervention with potentially irreversible lifelong consequences, the system stopped treating him like a father and instead started treating him like the problem. What was never treated as a problem is the idea that of medicalizing a child. What was never treated as a problem was the idea that most children who go on puberty blockers then continue on to cross-sex hormones, end up deciding not to continue the transition process after all, but are stuck with lifelong consequences from them, and many end up sterile. What was treated as a problem was the father asking whether this was really the right path. What should have been stayed inside the family quickly became something the state took an interest in. Brent's hesitation wasn't seen as concern. His disagreement wasn't seen as love or responsibility. He started to be viewed as someone who might interfere. And then child welfare authorities entered the picture, not because of abuse, not because of neglect, not because his child was abused or neglected in any way whatsoever. What the state decided in its own deeply ideological woke view was that a father disagreeing with the medicalization of his child was itself harmful. His concerns weren't treated as a parental judgment. They were redefined as emotional abuse. His words were no longer just words. They became evidence. And this is where the story stops being disturbing and starts becoming shocking. Brent was arrested. He wasn't arrested for hurting his kid. He wasn't arrested for neglect. He was arrested because he refused to affirm a medical path with irreversible consequences for a minor. He found himself facing criminal charges, dragged into court, forced to defend himself, not for something he did, but for something he believed. Think about that. A father asking to be involved ends up in handcuffs. A father asking questions ends up in court. This is the pivot point that should scare the hell out of everyone watching this video. We are raised in this country believing that disagreement is allowed, especially inside families, and especially when the stakes involve a child's future. We're told free speech matters, that parents have rights, that the state does not punish you for thinking differently. But once the state decides that disagreement itself is harm being done, a parent becomes conditional. You're no longer a mother or father with judgment and responsibility, you become a risk factor to be managed. You become secondary to the state's so-called wisdom. This is where I draw a hard line, and this is where you should too. When the state starts acting like it is the parent, something is profoundly broken. This is not the America we grew up in, and it sure as hell is not the America I want to live in. And let's be honest about something else. If these treatments were truly part of a normal, healthy medical conversation, you wouldn't need the pressure. You wouldn't need the intimidation. You wouldn't need to threaten parents with arrest and court proceedings or the loss of their child just for asking questions. Brent Bowlby wasn't asking to control his child's identity. He wasn't asking the state to take sides. He was asking for something far more basic, the right to remain involved while the life-altering decisions were still being discussed. Instead, the outcome had already been decided, with one parent and the state aligned and the other parent pushed out of the picture. The message was clear, even if it never stated it outright. Participation by the parent was optional. Agreement was not optional. And when a parent asking to stay in the conversation is treated as a threat, when the response is arrest, court, and criminal charges, we no longer live in a free country. That's control. And as disturbing as this story is, it's not an outlier. It's a warning sign of something happening all over the country. And if you think Brent Bowlby's case was a one-off, if you think this was some strange mistake, it wasn't. What happened to Brent is part of a much bigger pattern playing out across the country. Let me show you what I mean. Across the country, school districts are quietly adopting policies that allow children to socially transition at school. This means that they are allowed to dress as the opposite sex. On arrival at school, they change into opposite sex clothes and use the name they chose for themselves, that the whole school uses, and the parents are never told about this. Teachers are instructed to use new names and pronouns, and in some cases, they are explicitly told not to tell the parents if a child asks them not to. So the child's in control there. Think about that. A school deciding it knows better than a parent. A teacher being told to keep secrets about a child from their own parents. I have to ask, what the F? In some states, there are active proposals, and in others, laws already passed that redefine parental disagreement as potential harm. Not abuse or neglect, disagreement. Parents are being told, affirm your child's sexual identity, or what really is a treatable mental illness, by agreeing to risky cross-sex hormones or risk losing custody. Parents are being told, go along, or you may be investigated, questioned, and you may be labeled unsafe. This doesn't just turn parenting upside down. It hands your God-given right and responsibility as a parent over to the bureaucrats who have zero stake in the long-term consequences their decisions have on your child's life. At the same time, medical guidelines pushed by activist organizations are being treated as unquestionable truth. Today, children are fast-tracked towards puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and irreversible medical decisions. 14-year-old girls chopping their breasts off, often before anyone has addressed any of the underlying mental health issues like anxiety, depression, autism, or trauma, which virtually every one of these kids has. What used to be the first line of care, careful evaluation, therapy, and time, is no longer the standard. That is old school from before the mid-1990s. Radical ideological therapists have decided that if a child says they're trans, you simply must believe them and medically treat them. So in many cases, if a child is old enough, medical intervention becomes the first response. When parents object, the response is no longer a discussion. To activists, doctors, therapists, teachers, and administrators, the parent's objection becomes justification to report them to the state. I know you're thinking this sounds like East Germany under the Stasi or Soviet Russia under the KGB, but you'd be mistaken. This is happening right here, right now, in the good old United States of America. And here's the part that should really sink in. What you've just heard isn't about one father. It's not about one school district, and it isn't about one state. It's about what happens when ideology stops being questioned and starts being enforced. For years, institutions embrace this ideology without doing the due diligence that is expected of them. Groupthink took over, while normal skepticism and critical thinking disappeared. Anyone who raised concerns was labeled a problem, but that tide is finally turning. Public support is eroding, legal challenges are mounting in multiple countries, and the legitimacy of this entire framework is being questioned in ways it hasn't been before. While parents are being pushed out of the conversation, something else is starting to happen behind the scenes. The courts are stepping in. Federal funding is being challenged. And for the first time in years, institutions that enabled this are finally starting to feel real pressure and pushback. That's what we're going to be talking about in the next video, in video part 2. Meanwhile, I hope you're finding us and all my videos informative and interesting. Please, I need your help to grow this channel. It makes a huge difference in the ever-changing YouTube algorithm that uses in deciding when and who they will show my videos to. Please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be notified whenever there is a new video that I post, such as part 2 coming up. Please like this video and comment below about what you're seeing happening to trans children near you. Please look for part 2, which is available just after a few hours after this is uploaded. Thank you, subscribe, and I'll see you in part 2.